Hey Booktube! Welcome back to my channel, I am the Book Mage. So this is my slightly late December wrap up, and I know I have talked about these books a bit in some of my end of year videos, so I'm going to try and keep this like brief. I only have 3 books to get through. So with that, I'm just going to get on with it. So the first book that I read in December was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now I do not have this one, I borrowed this. I bought it for my mum a while ago, so I just borrowed that copy. I feel like everyone knows what this book is, probably everybody has read it already, but essentially you're following the sort of retelling of the life story of this Hollywood starlet named Evelyn Hugo. It's pretty much just her whole life story. It's historical, it's told in like an interview format, so I honestly have no idea what to say about contemporary books. Like when it's a fantasy, I can tell you so much about different kinds of fantasy, but when it's contemporary, I'm like, yeah, it's set in the real world. What else do I say? There's no magic system. I can't tell you about it. So this is not normally my kind of thing, and I feel like you'll realise that. Myself and 2 friends have started what we are tentatively calling a goth girl book club, which isn't reading goth books specifically, but we are all of us 3 goth or like goth adjacent alternative women, I guess. So we started a little goth girl book club in December, and this was the first pick. I think one of my friends had seen like a TikTok or something of a girl reading this book at the airport and like having a massive reaction to it, and I guess we wanted to find out like what is she reacting to. Now I will say, as somebody who reads a lot of like grimdark, I read a lot more shocking content than what you can possibly find in here. I did not have any reactions that strong. And I'll be honest as well, like I was waiting for a part in the book that would make me, even if I don't react the same, that I would at least be sure which part of the book the person in that video was reacting to. I could not figure it out. I could not figure it out. I did not think that any one part of this book was any more shocking or devastating than like another similar part. Like there were a couple scenes it could have been, none of which I really had any reaction to, but my lovely friends at book club did tell me which scene they are pretty sure it's meant to be, and I was like, okay. Probably not surprising to say then that I'm giving this a 3 stars, maybe like 3 and a bit, I'm not entirely sure, but like I think it's well written. I think I could read it fairly quickly. It is fairly short. It's again one of those where I think no matter how well it's written, it's just not for me. There's the specific things that I enjoy in books or that make me enjoy a book, and while this was fine, it's fine. It's like a historical, contemporary, what else am I supposed to say about it? It's fine, but it was a 3 stars. The only other thing to say about this is, again, once a month you're probably going to start seeing a random book in my wrap-ups that doesn't seem like something I would pick up, probably, and if you do, it's because it's for Goth Girl Book Club. So following on from that, I actually ended up picking up one of my absolute favourite books of this year, and if you've seen some of my end of year videos, you will have seen this. And it is The Tyranny of Faith by Richard Swan. This is the 2nd book in the Empire of the Wolf series. This is a high fantasy grimdark series. The first book is The Justice of Kings, and in that novel you're following a justice, which is like a magical lawman. He has a set of like very specific like unique magical powers that help him enforce the law across this ever expanding empire. And the start of the story is sort of like a murder mystery. The wife of a wealthy noble has been murdered, like her body's been found in weird circumstances, and so it's up to the justice and his small party of helpers to figure out like who killed her, what's going on, what's this about. Without going into spoilers, obviously this plot spirals into having much bigger, greater implications for like far more than just like this one little city that they're in. And so going into book 2, things just sort of open out so much more. I really enjoyed the world building, like the expansion of the setting. I really enjoyed getting to see more of like the magic system and like I guess kind of like the theology, and it's very political. There's a lot of politics. There is more of like a mystery aspect in this, but at this point you're trying to figure out so many different little like interconnecting things, and the journey that the characters go on, it's such a wonderful book. I gave this 5 stars. I feel like you should know by this point, this book made this series like just skyrocket to one of my favourite like ongoing fantasy series just ever, and the last book comes out in February, so you know I'll be reading it as soon as possible. But yeah, if you like grimdark, if you like high fantasy, if you like really 3-dimensional, really complex characters, flawed characters, like it's got like a really grand scope. There's like the magic is really interesting in the way I don't want to spoil like the way that it works or like the kind of other things that it like ties into, but I will say if you like darker fantasy and the kind of stuff that I like, if you look at the things that I in the past have rated like 4 and 5 stars, if you think you might be like me, absolutely give this series a go. The first book, I really liked it. I give it a 4 stars. I know some people that didn't like it because they weren't into like the smaller like murder mystery aspect of it, but once you get to book 2, it branches out so much. If you've read book 1 and you didn't enjoy book 1 as much, give book 2 a try, because I feel like the way that this opens up and like the consequences, the actions, it's just, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I feel like if what you didn't like was like small town murder mystery but fantasy, then just give this one a go, because it goes so many places. So yeah. It's also devastating. So this ended up being my second favourite book of the year, beaten only by Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. But if I had not also read it this year, this would have been my favourite book of the year. Like, it was close. It was really close. And then the last book that I read in December, and the last book that I read all year, was The Book of Eve by Meg Clothier, and I believe this one was a Goldsborough monthly book. So this is a low fantasy with kind of minimal fantasy aspects, but I picked this up because it's set in a convent, and I don't know if that just kind of made me think of like Christmassy things, because it's like Christianity adjacent, it's like religious, but either way, it felt kind of seasonal to me. And I ended up being quite glad that I picked it up. So it is set in a convent, and the basic setup is that these 2 gravely injured women turn up at the doors of this convent, and with them they've brought this strange book. And the sister who works in the library, she's like the convent's librarian, she obviously takes this book for herself and is trying to puzzle out sort of what it is. The book is weird, it's strange, it seems to change, sometimes it appears blank, sometimes there's like weird stuff going on with it, and she's never seen anything like it. And at the same time, the menfolk of the city, led by a like holy brother, are turning up at the doors of the convent, demanding to know what happened to the women, and without really saying it, it's quite obvious that they are also looking for this book. So the librarian sort of has to decide whether she's going to keep this book safe or hand it over. So it's quite short. It is, I don't want to say slow, but it is a very small, it's got like quite a narrow scope for a story. It's set pretty much entirely in this convent and like the day-to-day life of the sisters within the convent. The fantastical, magical aspects to the book are quite minimal. They are there throughout, but it's very sort of, it feels very small scale. This is a very character-driven story. I don't necessarily think this will be for everyone, but I ended up really enjoying this. It was that kind of book where I'd read like 1 or 2 chapters and then I'd look back and I'd actually read like 5 or 6 chapters. If you want the kind of book where you can read like 100 or 200 pages in a day without feeling like you've read 100 or 200 pages in a day, this is just that kind of book. I ended up really enjoying it. I gave this a 4 stars. I really liked the way that the magic worked. I really liked the sort of, you have such a wide cast of female characters. I feel like you could understand them all. They all had their own motives. They all have their own flaws and their own purposes, but this book is very much like, men ain't shit. This book is very much like, you know what causes issues? Men. So yeah, there is like a pretty obvious feminist aspect to this, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. As a read to just like close out the end of the year, something to just like read by the fire, when I got a few spare moments during the holidays, I actually really enjoyed this. Despite this being like a low fantasy and not massively eventful, not action-packed in any sense, I really enjoyed this. I really liked this, and if you're looking for something that's a bit more understated, a bit more, it's not slower paced. It has like quite a decent pace throughout, but if you're expecting like massive action and consequences and that sort of thing, you're not going to get that. But if you're willing to read like a smaller, more personal story, I really enjoyed this one. So yeah, I was quite glad to close out the year with this one, and I think having read a 3, 4 and 5 stars, that means that my average for December is a 4 star, which I reckon is probably so much higher than any other month. So yeah, it was nice to read a 4 and a 5 stars in the same month, and like nothing below a 3 stars. So while I didn't read a lot in December, quality wise, I can't complain. Quality wise was pretty good. I mean, both the 2 books that I picked for myself, I really enjoyed. I feel like following what I've said about my reading goals for like this coming year, so far, even though this is December, I feel like I'm getting off to a good start. Like, this bodes well. So that is it for this video. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. Do let me know if you've read any of these and if you enjoyed any, or if you're thinking of picking them up. The latter 2 I would highly recommend, especially Empire of the Wolf. If you like grimdark, political, high fantasy, Empire of the Wolf. I'll be talking about it for the rest of my life. And with that, do we have a wolf emoji? Leave me a wolf emoji. Leave me like moon. And with that, I hope you guys are all having a great start to the new year. And hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!